we ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
I think we're ready. More people may come in, but try you all set. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Desmond-Fish Public Library on this beautiful, beautiful afternoon. We're gathered here to commemorate and honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And makes it a very, very, very important day. I want to, first of all, by the way, I'm Nia Prentice. I'm president of the board here. I want to introduce a member of our advisory council, Steve Kent. Steve is the person who, in 1994, started organizing events here at the library in honor of Dr. King. And we've continued ever since then, with a few years off for COVID and that's over 30. But anyway, I also want to welcome our assembly person, Dana Levenberg. And I think since you were elected, you've come to every one of our events that we have. So thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our special guest today. If you were here last year, his sister was our wonderful speaker, Dr. Virginia Brown from the Hastings Center. And Raymond Brown, I will let him tell you a bit about himself, and then he's going to tell you about some really remarkable ancestors of his, and also the significance of their work for us today. We will have posted on our website a paper that Ray Brown has written about them, and so you'll be able to find out more later. I think that's getting posted tonight. So without further ado, Ray Brown.
Thanks for having me. I have a lot to say. From my sister last year, I understand that it's a very interactive group. So I got my wife in the back who's going to speed me along because she knows I like to tell stories and talk. So I'll try to give you some, information I feel that's important, but also I want to have you engage and build on what I've said or add to it, okay? Thanks for coming today. I think everyone's here for a little bit of a jolt, given the events of today, the inauguration and everything. And so I hope I can give you some positive energy in the light of people of color and King. And, I put this picture here as a little tease. That's obviously Dr. Martin Luther King, and this is my grandfather. His name's Raymond Pace Alexander. And I'm Raymond Alexander Brown, so I was named after him, obviously. But, obviously, in order to understand the story that I want to tell, I got to tell you a little bit about King, or about my grandfather first, and also about us here, everybody here today. One of the first times I gave a talk on my grandfather, it was actually very recently. There's an article in the Times that I was reading on the way. And it came from the American First Policy Institute. Just by the name, you can understand who they are. I don't study them, but they're doing their thing to keep America first. And they're talking about curriculum. And they said there's going to be some changes. There's things they want to institute. And some of the changes was stopping schools from promoting inaccurate and unpatriotic concepts about American history surrounding institutionalized racism. So this is what they're attacking, our talk today. Because it can be framed that we are bringing incorrect facts to the record. And really, the facts are suppressed. And so us being here to learn, me being here to share, and us working together is a defiance on today, and it started today. But I'm happy to be here to share with you my family story and my grandfather's connection to King. Let me actually go. We're not moving. Not me. Okay, there we go. So as I said, I'm Raymond Pace Alexander's grandson. That's my mother in the middle. You might remember my sister there, and that's me, and that's us when we were younger. One thing about family history is it's involved, right? Complicated, complex. Well, when your mother is the daughter of probably one of the most prominent black men in the country at the time, it's really hard. And for her response was fleeing, literally, Philadelphia, where my grandfather practiced. And in order to flee, she married my dad, who was in officer candidate school to become a fighter pilot in the Air Force in 1956, 57. Okay, so she found her own nugget of history, perseverance, and relevance. But that took her out of the environment she grew up in. And, I say that as far as an interesting response because it can be burdensome. You think of Martin Luther King's son, for example. And, he followed in his father's footsteps, but was that really his calling, who he wanted to be? But there's also a lot of momentum and power that compels you to do something like that at times. Fortunately, my parents allowed us to be our own people. And, it's really nice because that also allows my information that I share, my perspective to share, to be, I think, leveled and balanced because I had my own experience with success. I tell people I might have peaked early. I was a world-class track athlete, ran the 800 meters, won 6 U.S. championships, full scholarship, University of Virginia. Best performance was 5th in the world indoor championships in 1989. So, I did my own thing. So, I was known as Ray Brown. I wasn't known as the judge's grandson. I'll tell you a funny story. Once I was at an event and this woman was introduced to me and she said, "Oh, I know you." And she mentioned my grandfather, this, that, and I just wanted to run for the hills because, I was my own man, which allows me to look at this history objectively, but with the warmth and passion, okay? So I think that's a great balance. As you can see, actually you might not be able to see, but my dad's African-American, therefore my mom is, therefore I am. So, sometimes people don't know what I am. And I say that because I think it's important because the way I talk and the way I'll refer to this information will be familiar. And, I'll say us and things like that. And people might look, how can you say that? And I say, I get to say it because I'm black. Okay. So, that's a little bit of the history there. So, next slide. So, as I said, my mom kind of fled her background. And it was in the house, and it was mostly the values, which I really appreciate. It was the values, think of your grandfather being a judge and him instilling the adherence and respect for law and order, propriety, and all that stuff. So that's what I remember the most was the values that were instilled in us. And so I didn't know his stories. And, at the same time, a lot of us, when we're told about great people, we're just told about what they did. It's like getting a baseball player's card. Now, if this guy's a baseball player, yeah, I like him because he hit 50 home runs. And I really don't care about anything else. But for me, and I think for a lot of people, when you hear about the accolades and accomplishments of people, you want to know a little bit more. But at the same time, I haven't even told you the accolades and accomplishments of my grandfather yet, but real short, real quick. Well, it's going to be in here. 1 sec, we'll get there. But, you do want to know more. At least I do. And so because of that, I knew my grandfather was a judge, the first black judge in Philadelphia. I really don't think my mom focused on where he went to law school or, a whole bunch of other stuff about the story. So I started to do my own research. And so, why should you listen to me? Look, it's not family history at the dinner table that I'm going to share with you. It's hard work that I've done because my grandfather left 115 banker boxes. Now, it was way more than that. I've spoken with the archivist at the University of Pennsylvania where he went to undergraduate, and he told me it was a warehouse full of stuff that he had to distill through to get to 115 banker boxes of information. And those boxes are still somewhat unearthed. There's still a lot of information that people haven't gotten to. And I've chosen to do it because to answer a question, and then out of curiosity, and the other thing is we're talking about being here, as I said earlier, the victor writes the history. The victor writes the history. And our history is not told because we're so busy just trying to survive that there aren't numerous of us out there doing the work that it takes to understand this history and share it and make it relevant to other people. So, as was mentioned, I wrote this story, and I don't know what's coming next. I'm a closet writer. I say I'm not crazy enough to think I can make a living as a writer, but I still write, and it's mostly for myself. I had to write this story. So it stems from, or what brought it about, just a little preface is that my mom told me, actually when The Watchmen, Parker Lee's book that was written after she died anyway, when that book came out, my mom told me, To Kill a Mockingbird was my favorite book. I'm up there, oh, okay. And I noted it. Now, I read it in high school, or no, junior high. I wasn't behind. There were reasons. But, so I read it in high school, or junior high, and didn't remember much. But then I read it again, and just let me share with you. I'm going to put my glasses on. The final court scene in To Kill a Mockingbird is powerful. While the courtroom emptied, Tom's defense attorney, the earnest, forthright, and honorable Atticus Finch, quote, stood alone and gathered his belongings as he prepared to leave the courtroom, unquote. The balcony remained full of the town's colored folk and Finch's young children, Scout and Jem. Everyone was rapt, as if the proceeding were to continue. When Atticus turned to take his lonely walk down the aisle, everyone in the balcony rose to honor him for his tireless defense of Tom. Reverend Sykes nudged Scout to stand and whispered, "Your father's passing." I cried. I literally did. No wonder my mother loved this book. This scene put her life into context. Her father was also a revered barrister who built his reputation on brilliance and integrity. He practiced in Philadelphia during the same era. I saw my grandfather, not Atticus, in this courtroom when I read the book. The pride and reverence people felt for Atticus Finch evoked how people felt about my grandfather, Raymond Pace Alexander, as he perennially defended people who were previously indefensible. Alexander was as tall, handsome, and dignified as Gregory Peck, who was cast as Atticus Finch. He tried hundreds of equally sensational cases like Tom Robinson's once he passed the Pennsylvania bar in 1923. One material difference between Atticus Finch and my grandfather was that Raymond Pace Alexander was not a fictional character, but an actual black man. What a contrast. Pop was the son of a slave, the grandson of a slave owner, a 1920 graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, a 1923 Harvard Law School graduate who would rewrite race relations in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and become the city's first black judge in 1959. Atticus was invented to initiate an honest conversation about race, Pop-Pop's life was real, too painful and incendiary for mainstream historians to chronicle. America has trouble with America, with a mirror held to its face. So that is, in a nutshell, my grandfather. And that history was not conveyed to me in a forceful fashion. You got to be like your grandfather, things like that. He was just this great guy. I knew him for a little bit. We lived in California. Like I said, my dad was in the Air Force, so we were far away from Philadelphia where he did his thing. And saw him a little bit, but got to know him. So this talk, bringing it back around to King and Alexander. Precedence, trying to anchor it here, precedence. Everyone has a precedent. Everyone has a precedent. And, when we think about King, we honor and treasure him. But people came before him. And as you can see in that picture, my grandfather came before him. And he was a significant figure that I have to work to prove in the sense, to footnote and bring you the documents. But they were friends, and they worked together in many different ways. We haven't even gotten to my grandmother, and we're already too far along. Yeah, my wife's wrapping me up. Not wrapping me up, but getting there. But real quickly, my grandmother, my grandfather's wife, obviously, is actually more renowned and revered than him, because I think more people have gotten a hold of her work. Anyway, Sadie Tanner Moore Alexander, or Mossell Alexander, they're going to build a statue of her in Center City, Philadelphia. I was on a call the other day about the statue and their goals and ambition and everything. And a woman from Howard University was on. And back in the 80s, the work of Charles Hamilton Houston was integrated into the curriculum of Howard Law School. Charles Hamilton Houston was Thurgood Marshall's mentor, and he was the architect of the work that brought us Brown versus Board of Education. But this woman, as I said, she said that issue that is integrated into the curriculum at Howard, the person that was doing the legal work beforehand was my grandfather in 1936, Raymond Pace Alexander, and it was the Berwyn County case. And so, in a nutshell, what happened was in the Berwyn County, outside of Philadelphia, Main Line, a new school was built. And so when the new school was built and everyone moved into the new school, they told the black kids, no, you get the old school. So Jim Crow racism cropping up, and my grandfather was the one that fought the battle and won that case. And how he fought the battle was he boycotted the school. And so the children stayed out of school for over a year. Over a year. So we have a precedent here. And not only that, there was a lot of legal work that he did also. And so going back to that picture with King and my grandfather, okay, so this Berwyn County was 1936. That picture was at the 50th anniversary for the Alphas, okay? And that was in 1956. Who remembers the timeline of the Montgomery boycott? 1956, okay? So this was in the summer, I think it was July. And so this big gathering was a big to-do, it was huge. 50th anniversary, as they always are, it's huge. But I've even read the invitations because he was one of the orchestrators. He was the tea master. And my grandfather was known for an hour and a half closing summations of his cases. Okay, so he could go. So you could imagine him being a tea master. He was running the show. But King is in the middle of the boycott, and my grandfather obviously was an Alpha too. And you think of their age. King was born in 29, same year my father was. Father, son, precedent. Okay, and then, as the woman said, the history was indoctrinated at Howard University as far as the work on Brown versus Board. But I failed to tell you is that my grandfather is noted in the teaching of that course as being the architect of the precedents that were used in order to create Brown versus Board. So that's where the connection is. So as I said, I'm going up and down to Philadelphia and trying to connect it even further. But next slide. But we also have a little documentation. So my wife is she works at Sotheby's, and she knows people in the books and manuscripts group. I found this letter. My wife laughs at me because it's from King, signed here, and it looks better in person. But it's in the archives, and my wife said, "This should be, you should be able to sign it out and have to sign it out, and it should be sealed and kept out of air and all this stuff." A friend put a value on it, $25K. Well, because in the way you value it is historical significance, and then the extra writing here, there's a name for it, but there's things that give it its value. And so, just to read you, letter from King, signed by King, to my grandfather, dear Judge Alexander, your telegram came at a time when my spirits needed just a boost, just such a boost. Despite the public acclaim, the action front of the civil rights movement is still a lonely frontier. We desperately need men such as yourself to bring their minds, bodies, and experience to the aid of the nation in this historic crisis. This was 1964. Okay, so they had a relationship, obviously, and given his work as a lawyer before he became a judge, there's just so much evidence, and that this letter here is actually part of the evidence that they had that relationship and that they probably leaned on each other. And actually, confirmation of that was the letter my grandfather sent him, and in the letter, this letter here, King saying, "Yeah, I can use your help. Give me some ideas. I'm thinking of doing this, that, and the other." And my grandfather's response was 7 pages. I hear you, man. I mean, he didn't play, and that's the thing you can see from him is that he was brilliant. 7 pages, he's just knocking stuff out. It'd take me 2 months to come up with that. Oh no, 7 pages. And now to top it off, what do all people in King's position need? Money. They need money. So King in this letter asked him, "Can you get some friends to raise some money for me?" Or, he was a bundler. We all know that name now, right? He was a bundler. And so he was asked to get 10 friends to give, I think it was 500 each, something like that. I went to my inflation calculator. So my grandfather, he said, "Oh, I got $1,000 for you." Okay, it's the last page of this letter. I couldn't get it up on my screen. I don't know what happened, but it's in here. He had $1,000 for him, inflation calculator, 10 grand. He was a judge. He wasn't making the big bank anymore. I'm not saying, my grandfather did well. We're not a wealthy family, but, we did okay. And thank God, our family has a little bit, not a lot. I'm not, being modest or anything, just a little bit, but more than most of us do. More than most of us do. And it makes a difference because, when you hear this stuff, who has a extra couple bucks to take care of the heater, the transmission, whatever, passing something on, whatever. We don't have that. I say that as black folks, but my grandfather was able to do a little bit for us. We still got work, we still got worry, but he did a little bit for us. And even while he was a judge, after being a judge for 5 years, he had 10 grand in today's dollars for Dr. King. So I thought that was really great to see. So like I said, I'm trying to bring it together. So they were in it together. They were in it together. And so as I said earlier, this will be quicker and then we can get to questions there. That's great-grandfather, Hilliard Alexander. Great thing about having famous family is that people do your genealogy for you. He was born 1857, Park Forest Plantation, Mecklenburg County, Virginia. Wow. I went to the University of Virginia. I got my MBA there too. And actually in doing the history, what they used to do is if a black kid wanted to go and they should have been accepted, they said, oh, no, you can't come, but we'll send you to the black school. They would send them because they didn't want nothing, right? So they fortunately, we turned it around on them after a while, and I got a full scholarship, so that's pretty nice. So that's great-grandfather, and his father was, and here's the other thing I have to add is that, I've done my genealogy, and, obviously there's other people in there, and I'm sure it's our plantation owner person, but he was a congressman. He was a congressman. So, next. And that's Mom. They were great-grandma. She's from a plantation around the way, but I think they understand, they believe that they met in Philadelphia. Hilliard left at about 9 years old. So, okay. And so, like I said, precedence, right? And as I was saying earlier, we're talking about black history in essence, right? My grandfather wrote this. I knew nothing of myself until I met Dr. Carter Woodson, and the white man knew nothing of me. I was a total stranger in the house. In the house, America was as much my house as my white classmates. So this is in reference to him being in high school. He went to Central High School. So if anyone familiar with Philadelphia, Central High School is a revered, esteemed public high school. And, he was I think he was the only black student on the academic track. But anyway, my grandfather got a full scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania. And so anyway, Carter Woodson, everyone know Carter Woodson? Carter Woodson is the founder, more or less, of Black History Month. Okay? He was the second African-American to get a PhD from Harvard University. The first one was W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay? Woodson wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. And it's a very interesting book because actually, if you read it, you can almost see my grandfather reading it because they became friends and they remained in touch with each other. As I say, precedent. And Woodson awakened him. I'm not saying he was wayward. I think he was too brilliant to be wayward. But you have to have respect for yourself, self-respect, self-esteem, self-efficacy in order to have a vision to do something. And Carter Woodson was one of the people that helped instill that in him. So it's my grandfather on the right. My grandmother, that's the Philadelphia seal. I know we're in New York, but that's the Philadelphia seal. But I will tell you one thing is my grandfather was so monster that full scholarship to Penn undergrad. He earned a scholarship to Harvard Law School, okay? But he still needed expenses. So he was a porter, red cap, in the summer, and he came to New York, and while he was doing that, he was studying constitutional law and I think it was international relations at Columbia, okay? For fun. It was It was a non-degreed program. And you know, I mean, I'm literally going to the archives now, so they got to get my birth certificate and his death certificate before they release the information to me. But I'm literally working on that to see what his courses were and what else might have been going on. But he was doing it for fun. Oh my God. Now, my grandmother, Sadie, Mossell, she was the first black woman in the country to get a PhD. Okay? She went to Penn undergrad. Well, she did all her work at Penn. Couldn't get a job after she earned her PhD in economics. Okay? She couldn't get a job commensurate to her training because at that time, okay, she could only teach like grade school. She probably couldn't even teach high school because she was a woman, not just because she was black, but because she was a woman, right? And so she went down to North Carolina, and that didn't work because it's a whole nother story. Like I said, I go on forever. So she came back, married my grandfather, and she said, or my grandfather said, what do you want to do? She said, I'm going to go to law school. She went to Penn. She went to the University of Pennsylvania Law School. My grandfather, out the box, first year of law school, said, I can handle it. I can support you while you do that. And so then when she finished, she went to law school and worked with him. Okay? Passed the bar. Next. That's my grandmother's family, Mossells. Okay? I think my wife, she's not back there doing it, but I can hear her. We go on, and you know, we can go back if you want. Next one. Aaron Mossell, her father, first black law school graduate, University of Pennsylvania. Precedence, okay? How'd they do it? I didn't tell you the story how I believe my grandfather did it, but it's clear how my grandmother did it. Next slide. Aaron Mossell, that's her, or Nathan Mossell, that's her uncle, first black medical student graduate. Nathan Mossell, first black graduate, UPenn Med School. He recounts how his mother told him how his father, Sadie Tanner Mossell, Alexander's great-grandfather, was useless to his master because he viciously resisted his master's attempt to bend his will. Grandfather told his master he could sell him further down south if the master so wanted, that it would not work for him because grandfather did not believe that slavery was justifiable. Okay? Now, the thing about that resonates me is that friend of ours, her son goes to Antonella, where's he go? Oberlin. Son goes to Oberlin. And so she said to me one day, the first black woman that graduated from Oberlin was in 18 whatever. I don't remember. And she was just amazed. She was beside herself. She couldn't, how could that be, Ray? Well, you know, given my family, I know how it can be, but you still need to put it in context. And how can it be? Because even though people were slaves, even we were marginalized, even though we were stripped, we still had a soul, we had a heart. And the grandfather, Nathan, said, no, I'm a man. No one actually had to tell him that. He just knew, this isn't for me. And that is in most everybody till it's beaten out, or you accept what someone told you. Now let's flip it. We're in the library here right now. Andrew Carnegie, where did he came from nothing. Irish, right? Scottish, sorry. And immigrant, no formal training. Where did his intelligence get developed, cultivated? I think you know. No? The library. The library of one of the people that he worked for. He was given full reign. And he had this big brain, as we say at my house. We say it jokingly, use your big brain, please. He had this big brain, and he was had access to this library. And if you don't know, his appreciation of that opportunity is why he was the patron of libraries throughout this country. It's in us. It's in everybody. Not everyone's confused about how Andrew Carnegie made it. But if you're a black person, you're a slave. How'd you do that? It's like, we had the same soul, same heart. My grandmother's family. As her father, he was not a slave. How did he get educated? What it is, what we notice is the more and more presence people of color, people different are in people's lives, they get more threatened because they're encroaching, or people feel they're encroaching on what's theirs. He was in Pittsburgh, small enclave of black folks. So since it was small, it wasn't as threatening. So he was able to go to school. And he was part of the church. He was a bishop in the church. He wrote 7 books. And he wrote the Christian Recorder. And actually, I forgot to share this. Imagine, we got my grandfather. This is a dissertation. And so got my grandmother. I know her. I'm studying my grandfather. This book is a aggregation of her speeches. And the writer, Nina Banks, has become a friend of the family. Anyone that's going to take the time to do this, you got to embrace. But she's a great woman, too. And she's writing the biography on my grandmother. So anyway, the bishop, one of his daughters became a doctor. Next slide. It's his son, Henry Ossawa Tanner. Anyone ever hear of him? And that's one of his paintings. Actually, we're in New York. Flight into Egypt is a exhibit at the Met right now. And the opening painting is his flight into Egypt. I should have put that slide up, my bad. But this is the most famous one. When Bill Cosby was appropriate, everyone referred to that painting as one that he owned, and he sold it recently. Actually, to the Waltons have one of the Waltons, Alice Walton, has a museum, and so this is here. So anyway, Flight into Egypt is at the Met right now, opening an Egyptian exhibit. So that's the Tanner's, my grandmother's uncle. So he's my great-great-uncle. And got the book here. And the father, Tanner here. So that's crazy. 4 people have 4 people in the family have books about it. So, as I said, kind of wrapping it up, trying to anchor it. Self-esteem, self-efficacy, resolve. These are all the ingredients everyone uses for success. It's just that a lot of times it's denied us by circumstances, strategically, history, precedence. I can tell you one story. Chris Rock, everyone know him, right? Chris Rock did his DNA on Finding Your Roots, PBS show. And he had an uncle. Now, Chris Rock, I don't know, he was impoverished, but very, very middle class, lower middle class, I think, Okay, but, not like this. And they're doing his roots. And uncle, I think it was, or great-grandfather, very close relative, not distant, was in the Union Army and then was in the legislature of North Carolina. He did not know that. And he said right there when it was revealed to him, if I knew that, I might have tried to do something more serious with my life. And that's how powerful history precedent is. That's why being here today is important, hearing these stories, honoring King, and understanding his value to so many people and his importance, because it lives on and it informs so many people, and that's what catapults and sends people further along. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Thank you. So, I heard it's interactive, right? Questions?
How did your grandfather deal with all the resistance? What worked up to the period where students actually boycotted?
Well, that's an excellent question because let's go back and think. Well, actually understand the history of Philadelphia, right? Because Philadelphia might have been in the north, but it's referred to up south, because it was a very, very racist town. Before my like the 10-year period before my grandfather passed the bar, I think it was like 2 or 3 blacks passed the bar. The 10-year period from the time he passed, and then like 33 around there, I think it was him. And then 10 years after that, it went back down to 2. And so actually there's a recording of him saying, obviously he's a lawyer, so he knows how to couch things. And lawyers are very precise in their language and how they say things. And he was given those numbers. And the interviewer says, so are you saying there's racism because of that? And he says, I'm not saying anything. I'm saying it needs to be investigated. Okay? Because you can't say, that's racist. You need to investigate it, right? And so he was in Philadelphia. I've read hate mail. He has a folder, hate mail, for things that he was working on. I mean, this is the Berwyn County was just one case. He did 1,000 cases a year. He did 1,000 cases a year. Now he didn't have partners, which is another story. But there are other lawyers equally trained, Yale, great schools. And actually, the first black clerk for a Supreme Court justice was a mentee of his. Okay, William Coleman, Harvard Law Review. But what you're asking, how do you deal? Steel spine. Steel spine. Like I said, the hate mail. They kept it for a reason. And he had, I would call him a peacock. He's a natty dresser. I mean, I almost wore a suit just because that. But, as a black person back then, as a black person back then, you were fighting to be respected. Okay, that's why going to these great schools was so important, because if you went to a HBCU, right, you went to with all them, you didn't learn anything. And it's like, no, people are sharp. They're sharp. But you don't want to have that argument, right? So I went to Harvard. What are you talking about, right? And so, he had impeccable training, self-confidence, bravado. I mean, it's insane. I mean, like I said, I knew him a little bit. And actually, someone wrote it better, but we went to the boardwalk when the boardwalk was probably 72, probably 70, 73, whatever, when it was still bustling. I mean, it went down and it came back a little bit. Anyway, and I even remember then as a 12-year-old walking down and having people say, Judge, and him stopping. And he was just well known. He was revered. He was loved. And, I tell people he knew he had right on his side. And in my story, I talk about how he knew he had the 14th Amendment on his side. He believed in the law. And he, confident, brilliant. My grandmother, how do you fight it? That is a great question, because that's kind of like the question I'm trying to answer, right? As far as how do you do it? And there's a lot. I mean, it's hard to get to, but it's a little bit's in the story. But, yeah.
You said he didn't have partners in
Oh, no, no, it closed when he became a judge in '59. And the archivist that collected his work, I know, and actually he's been very encouraging to me. And he keeps me going because he says there's a place for what I'm doing in the canon. And he did, it's interesting, you know, I'm not a PhD like my sister, but my sister's my associate. She's my research associate, so she keeps me honest and helps me, and helps me, you know, have the correct vision in the sense of what needs to be done.
So is the archive a family enterprise or is it?
No, it's at the University of Pennsylvania. He left them to the University of Pennsylvania, and there's actually a chair at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School that's named a civil rights chair, and they named my grandmother and my grandfather, even though he went to Harvard. And so he left them to Penn, and you know, they preserve them and take care of them, and they tell me a lot of people have sifted through them, but you know, it's interesting. I looked it up. I forgot her name. Motley.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you know, she. So my sister sends me, you know, a link to the documentary on her, and so I start doing my research, and well, anyone know the producer? Her son. Oh, her son. Because the victor writes the history, right? So it's almost your responsibility. It's almost your responsibility. I don't feel burdened, but if I don't do it, no one else is. There's one other thing I'll get you. Is there's a book, there was a famous case my grandfather had, the arsenic widows. Yeah, arsenic widows. So there was a ring of women killing their husbands with arsenic in Philadelphia. And there's a book about it, okay? My grandfather was called into the chambers of the judge presiding over previous cases. He says, this thing's going off the rails. I need someone I can trust to take care of this thing. You got to represent these women. He represented them. There's a book. I mean, there's a book about it. It's not about him, but there's a book about it, and they speak about him, or the author writes about him, and he says in one of the notes, you know, Penn Archives, there's a wonderful story about this judge I was telling you about that needs to be explored. I mean, this is some good stuff. Arsenic murders. He was first black man to defend white women. I mean, and there's a book, and you know, it's amazing because, you know, they talk about mainstream media, but it is cultivated and crafted, and others determine what we see. And so the stories have been told, but they haven't been given the promotion, the emphasis, the respect that they deserve, and that will, well, you know, you think of like Hidden Figures, right? Okay. You know, I did a little research on them. I read the book. That story is not better than this one here. It's not better. And from what I can tell, the powers that be came across this woman. She was doing her work. She's no different than me. She actually went to the University of Virginia. She was a business undergrad. I was a business MBA. She worked on Wall Street. I worked on Wall Street. And she's probably similar to me. And she had to write this story because these women were her neighbors. So like me, and I know people, oh, what do you mean black folks don't do something? It's like, these women my parents went to work with. Okay, so she had to write the book because no one else was. But what I think happened is that she was working on it, and that's why I call myself a closet writer. I haven't gone for the whole book, but it's hard, especially if you don't have the training, support, need some money. And I know this for a fact. She sold the rights to her book and the movie before she was done with the book. The powers that be saw the story. They chose to see this one. There's others out there. But when you try to get the next one, you know, it's not the same person, even though that thing did well. She sold a gazillion books. But they're going to say, blacks don't read. Like I said, I say things as a black person, I can say that. Young woman. No problem. I'll say it again. The victors write the history. And why don't they want AP African American history? The less we know, what did my grandfather say? Stranger in my house. If you're a stranger in your house, you don't belong in the house. You do not feel like you belong in the house. And that's the way he felt until Carter Woodson told him, you're not just some kid. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. You reminded me of something I forgot, which is maybe circa 2000, we had a program here with Bruce Wright, who was a federal judge, born in 1917, black judge, wrote a book called Black Robe, White Justice. I think they was cut him loose, Bruce. Because he believed that he wrote about how the justice system was stacked against black people, especially male. He was Lindsay's city attorney for a while, later sat on the federal bench. He was here, he came here and so forth. He died in 2005, so it could have been long before that. I wondered if you know his grandfather, he was born in 1970. He had a similar story where he got into Princeton, and then when they found out he was black, they let him go, same thing with us, and he ended up going to historic black college in Virginia. But and I was also curious about whether your grandfather came down on the bias and prejudice in the justice system, whether he felt he could redeem that bias.
Yeah, I would say as far as if you knew him, we all knew each other. The group was so small that we all knew each other. My sister told me a story. The former president of Howard University, my sister, that's where she got her PhD. She met with him. I forgot what brought it about, but I think it was family connection or something. But he told her, Swaggart, I think was his name. He told her, your grandfather wrote me a note congratulating me when I passed the bar. Because he wrote that to everybody, every black that passed the bar, because he knew what he went through. And he knew it, even today, it's still not a big number, right? And he knew how important it would be. And he was so appreciative of what they went through to get there. And so he was that type of person. So they probably knew each other. What are you saying about the law again?
Bruce Wright was outspoken.
How unfair.
About how just systemically
Yeah. That was why he wanted to be a judge, right? So he could be a part of that. And I've come across that in his writing and in my research, is that actually one of the interviews that on the web, he talks about how, life wasn't easy for me, and someone that understands that, sitting where I would as a judge, can maybe extend that sympathy that that person needs. I'm paraphrasing. And then one of his big legislative accomplishments was there was a community organization that I got to get this down better. I'm not writing on this now, so what I do is I go get stuff to the archives, copy it because it takes too long to read it there, obviously. So you don't know if you got gold or not. Like I didn't read this whole King letter until I got home, right? I just saw King on it, but it could have been a form letter or something. So anyway, so you get all the stuff and then you download it, then you got to read it. So I got Google Docs, pages and pages, and so like I said, my sister keeps me in line. It's like that's what you do. and you don't. She said the PhD is a 5-year process, And so, you know, it takes 5 years to distill all this stuff. So since I don't have this thing down, it's like I'm not embarrassed because it's just part of stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff that I come across. And then the other problem is you can't help but look at my grandmother, her family, you know, it's insane. But the bottom line is there's an organization in Philadelphia that was designed to basically give legal assistance to poor folks back in the day. And it's still in existence. But the point is that it had to go through the courts to be approved, and he marshaled it through. And it had black resistance because for poor/black folks to get free assistance meant that the lawyers that were looking to represent them were losing business. And so he was able to say, well, no, it's for the people. We got to do the right thing for the people. And if you guys lose business, sorry, you know, do better. Whatever. So he was ahead of his time.
I can't be quiet any longer. When I attended John Jay College of Criminal Justice for a master's in forensic science, I went to the lecture that Judge Bruce gave me. He was a brilliant speaker. He could arouse the students who adored him, and he wanted to become a full-time professor there. He had too much else to do. But he would do the workshop, and there were endowed chairs there, and he would take advantage of that to come and talk. And he inspired so many young people that was fabulous. So I guess for me, school is the way up and out. And John Jay is great because it's a public school.
Well,
and I just want to say to you, sir, not only that, this is your PhD.
my sister's behind me. Like I said, I'm doing it for myself, and you know, what comes of it comes of it, and I'm enjoying it, and you know, learning about what they did is inspiring. And talking about education, I mean, you know, in our family, I got my son here. He's at Brown, and his brother's at Boston College, and it doesn't happen by chance. And we learned that. My sister's two sons went to Penn, and daughter went to Michigan, and that was a mantra of the family passed down through my grandparents. And it is the equalizer, but you know, nowadays things are even more different where you can get around that. But especially if you're of color, there's always going to be that question mark, like I was saying, you know, HBCU. So you got to give things to at least unsettle them and make them work harder to go against you. Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about the weight that has to come with. Can you repeat the question, please?
I am just starting it. I'll talk loud. So, there's got to be a certain amount of weight, right? Because of the family story. Like every time you peel back one of the onions, there's some other, you know, someone in the met or someone prefers so and so to do that. But so that makes it special. But also, like you were saying, Chris Rock found out something about his family that the story was never told, and it would have changed his life had he known. And that's part of the point.
It might have changed it wrong, though.
May have.
Right? So, like I said earlier, my mom and dad allowed us to be who we were. And as an athlete, that was clear. That's who I was. Now, mind you, okay, I was born in 1961, and you know, I'm not a young kid, and so that was a time when, you know, student athletes, and they're still kind of ridiculed as far as their academic interests. And so, you know, given my family, it was like, no, you do both, and you can do this, but, you know, don't forget this. And so, like I said, I was able to be my own man. And then when you're number one in the country in your race in high school, and All-American in college, I'm part of the ACC Hall of Fame, Athlete of the Year at the University of Virginia, my 4th year. Now, you're doing your thing. If I didn't have my thing, that would have been a problem, because I would have been looking for my thing, and then default. Very easy to default what's right there in front of you. And I didn't have to. And then from my own success as an athlete, I was able to parlay that and, have my own success career-wise, family, all that stuff. And so, it was there. And I think it would have weighed way more heavily if I didn't have the chance to distinguish, and if they didn't let me distinguish myself, be my own person. And I think that's the most important thing for anybody in any parent.
There were a few things I heard earlier today, not here, that were disturbing, but I think you
Not here,
family shed some light. There was something I heard about how a certain kind of history wasn't going to be taught that would make, white people like me feel guilty or ashamed. And I really was grappling with, how do you respond to something like that? How do you respond to
It's infuriating.
eliminating calls for diversity, equality, and injustice? But you, I think, gave a little bit of an answer when you mentioned someone in your family said, what you do is investigate. Many people now are saying, oh, I'm not going to be paying attention to politics. I'm going to nurture myself and maybe hope for the best. But I think these times do continue to call for action, like investigating. Wokeness is teaching people about how the legacy of slavery helped, even white immigrants like me whose family came in the 1880s, but there was already a better bridge built for my ancestors than perhaps, say, for yours. And of course, another thing is when you tell how your family had a spine to stand up and get into Harvard back in the days when you probably had to have not just, you had to probably be as a black candidate to get into Harvard ages ago, stellar grades, not just passable grades. That might be used against people to say what was heard in the inaugural, it'll be a meritocracy, ignoring the injustice that continues. And we have to continue to address that. And maybe it's, again, as you said, investigation into those issues that will allow us to continue to address the inequality today.
Look, they're doing everything they can to dismantle what this country is. And, one of my firsts was, I was the first black teacher at Episcopal High School, which is a very prestigious boarding school in Northern Virginia. One of my students was Nancy Pelosi's son. And Paul Pelosi, named after his father, ran on the track team. I knew Paul really well. I was probably one of his favorite teachers. And we had family dinners. So one teacher sat at one end of the table, one sat at the other. And Paul was assigned to my table as assigned. And he always sat next to me. We always chatted, track, whatever. And I ended up being quoted in his senior book. Some schools you get a page or, under your name, you have your senior quotes. And so I was quoted, and it came from the dinner. And so one day, this kid, no lie, his name was Sterling McElwain. This is the type of kids I was teaching, right? and Sterling was complaining about all the work he had. And I can't remember. He was burdened. He was overwhelmed. And I looked at him and I said, "Lo siento, McElwain," which in Spanish means "I'm sorry." and Pelosi quoted me. Why do I say this? Is that I taught history, and to connect me with our day here today, connect me to, like my grandmother with her PhD didn't want to teach high school. I was happy to do that because I actually was still running, and it was probably the best job that I could have where I could still train. And then I did so well that after 3 years, I was able to quit and run professionally full time. So it served its purpose. But the point is, I taught history. American history taught in school is propaganda. And you know what? We're trying to bring together all these different people and everything, you have to instill them with mythological stories to make them feel proud of the country. But you can't lie to them and forget everybody else. And that's what we've done. And so then we continue to lie and say meritocracy. Elon Musk was here illegally. Illegally. He had a student visa, went to Stanford, and dropped out and started a company. Meritocracy. He jumped the line. He broke the rules, and he laughs about it. So, as you were saying, you're 100% correct, but the problem is it's too hard. It's too hard to do the work. It's not hard for me because I'm curious, and I'll read 2-3 articles to figure something out. It's too hard, though. And that's what's happening. People want to go to their site and read what they want to read and be told what to think. And that's where we are. As far as making people feel bad, that's the worst part of this story. Because it's only the truth. It's only the truth. And oh man, I mean, you know, Mossell, he moved his family to Canada because he didn't want them to grow up in a slave state in Maryland. He bought land. Now this is where the PhD and training comes into play that I haven't completed yet. But he bought a piece of property, and there were British laws in place in Canada which meant that the ownership of this property that he bought could not be transferred from I think the person was of royalty or something. And so when this person came back, he had to forfeit the property. Now, there's a book that Nathan, the son, wrote that refers to this. And the father says that the inexperience of the realtor and him was the reason why that happened. And I say, he took the hit. No one does not know that rule. Let me tell you, even back then, everyone knew what everybody owned. They just took it from them, my belief. Could be wrong, I got to document that. But the point is that our property, our rights, everything has been taken. It's a fact. And if you feel bad, sorry. And you know, the thing is, I'm not mad at you, right? That was a long time ago. Just like I told people, this is my family history. It's a precedent, it informs, but it's not automatic. I have a warmth in my heart for it, but obligation, thank God my mom knew, it's like, be your own man, Ray. Honor your education, be a good man. That's what she taught. That's what she taught. And that's what this family is about, right? So, if you own slaves, it ain't you, you know, or your grandparents or whatever. It's not you. It's okay. Amen. Thank you.